Hello and welcome to today's broadcast covering diversity and inclusion. My name's Jacqueline Healy. I head up the assessment consulting team at Amberjack. And during this session, I will share with you some of the key findings from our Insights report and some useful recommendations for how you can embrace D&I in any future selection design. So just to talk through our Insights report for those of you who have seen it in previous years or for those that are new to Amberjack's Insight, this year we've actually built the report around contributions from over 50 future talent employers. We've gained candidate insight from future talent and from apprentice applications. And this year we're basing the data on the 2020-21 campaign season, which means it's very reflective of recruitment during COVID and how that has actually impacted all the different parts of a selection process. In part one, I'm just going to talk through the application to hire ratios and what we're seeing in terms of the data coming through and any trends. And then part two today will be very much focused on how you can ensure that D&I is reflected through your selection process designed and some useful hints and tips for that. Okay, so looking then at application to hire ratios. In the recent years, we have seen application numbers in future talent actually decreasing. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this year we have seen an increase. Across all the functions, there is an increase in applications, but the already popular areas of sales and marketing and HR have definitely seen a bigger increase in those numbers. So we are seeing potentially a big oversupply in these areas. It's only the second year that we're running the apprentice data, but it does look like a bit of a different story in the apprenticeships. Instead of seeing that increase, we are actually seeing a slight drop in applications. And we have been considering why this could be. Potentially it's the effect of COVID, apprentices perhaps feeling more nervous to go out and take employment in the current economic climate. They've been advised potentially that it's safer to stay in education. Has the careers advice not been there as much as it has in previous years about the apprenticeships on offer? So it's an area we continue to monitor. As I said, it is only our second year of collecting data from apprentice campaigns, but it's one that will be interesting to look out for in the coming years to see if those application numbers do recover and can continue to go upwards. Okay, I'm just going to focus in now on future talent market and gender, especially looking here at females. So you'll be able to see the application and hire numbers have actually increased on previous years. And again, considering the effects of COVID, could this be that the way in which we are recruiting, the way in which we are assessing candidates has changed? It's a move more towards a virtual world. And could this potentially be a contribution in terms of the hires, of why we're seeing more hires there from females? Is it that they feel more at ease to perform in a virtual environment over that face-to-face environment? So again, it's great news. It's going in the right direction, but it's something again that let's keep monitoring year on year and see if next year we're still seeing this trend when potentially we move more back to the hybrid approach, essentially face-to-face and virtual, as opposed to all being virtual assessment. Looking at the females in our apprentice campaigns that we gathered data from, there you can see it's not such a rosy picture when we look at females. There has actually been some slight increase, but it's not in the same levels as we've seen in the future talent market. So again, more work to be done here in the apprentice market when attracting and making hires to females. When we looked at ethnicity, We are actually seeing some positive news coming through. So we can see that there's been some increases in hires of candidates from BAME backgrounds. That's gone up from last year, but the conversion rates are being hit, and that is due to the increased volumes we're seeing in applications. When we look at the apprenticeships, again, a similar story as it is in the gender market. There is still work to be done here to make apprenticeships more inclusive for candidates from BAME backgrounds. We do see that actually Black candidates are at a huge disadvantage when they are applying for apprenticeship roles. So lots of questions to be asked about why this is the case and how we can turn the dial to ensure that apprenticeships are seen as inclusive and a viable option for all candidates, especially those from BAME backgrounds, as that appears not to be happening at the moment. Just looking at disability, you can see that actually for those that have read previous Insights reports, it remains fairly stable year on year. No huge changes in percentage of applications or those conversion rates and number of candidates hired, which is good news. Okay, moving into part 2 now. So this is where I really wanted to bring to light diversity and inclusion in a selection process. So we often see lots of ways to monitor diversity and lots of ways to report it, but it's how do you truly make your selection process inclusive from the outset. And for us, that starts with the design. So when you're designing a selection process, how can you design one from the outset that treats everyone fairly? That means that there's no part of that process that one particular group should find more difficult to comply with than another. So we've just broken it down here into 4 different areas. So you can see in the first box, we're looking at how do you design that process that's free from direct discrimination. So obviously before you start designing, you should not set out to put in any criteria that is going to directly remove certain groups of candidates with a protective characteristic. So what we would advise you to do is really challenge the criteria of the role that you're looking to assess against. So if you have a behavioural framework, if you're looking for certain skills and certain abilities, really challenge that and ask, is it because you're using this criteria because you really have the data and the analysis to show that it's very predictive of successful performance, or are you just using criteria that you've used for a number of years and you think it's working, so you've not looked to challenge or change it? If you really want to create that change, it's likely that you're going to have to change that criteria that you are using to bring people into the business. And we recommend that if you conduct a thorough job analysis, understand the requirements of success in the role, you really can then highlight what your real legitimate criteria should be when you're measuring candidates. So once you've understood what criteria is absolutely essential to measure candidates against, then you look to actually design those materials. And the design comes from the process. So what types of tools or tests are required in that process to assess that legitimate criteria. And what type of behaviours are you going to assess those candidates against once they're in the process? And just remembering that if you are looking to design your materials and your criteria based on your current high performers, you are really then just gaining opinions based on one demographic that currently exists in your organisation. So it's unlikely that you're going to get huge diversity of thought through that process. So it's really critical to ask the business for the right representation. So you may not necessarily need to speak directly to individuals in those underrepresented groups, but you can ask stakeholders within the organisation, really challenge them. Are there any other ways to achieve outcomes than what currently exists, what currently is done? Here at Amberjack, we certainly can conduct those types of focus groups and conversations with you or for you, and provide the data output you need to really have that inclusive process and framework behind it. When it comes to then, I guess, delivering those newly designed process, it's important that you make sure that you're piloting them before you set them off onto new candidates coming into the process. So if you've introduced a new test, a new tool, a new exercise, then we would absolutely recommend that you pilot that on different demographics within the organisation, or use a third party to help you with those pilots and really understand if the behaviours or the attributes that you're looking for are easily visible from all candidates and not just one particular group. Then even if you are able to do all that, and you set your new process out and you have your candidates coming through your process, it's absolutely essential that you continue to monitor the effectiveness. So as candidates are coming through, are you looking to see if minority groups are being selected at the same rate as your majority group? So that's what we refer to as adverse impact. And again, at Amberjack, we conduct that on behalf of clients, looking at the data and being able to provide you with outputs and recommendations for how you could potentially improve parts of the process where adverse impact exists. What is important with adverse impact is not looking at BAME as a group. It's more breaking that down into individuals, into the different individual backgrounds of candidates. Because you may see them that if you group BAME candidates together, that actually there's limited adverse impact. But when you start to pull that group apart and look at the individual heritages within that group, you may see that one group is more adversely affected than others. And that's the area of focus when you're looking to make some continuous improvement. And then finally, just looking at positive action. So positive action was introduced as a way to ensure underrepresented candidates are offered positions in roles. And I guess the use of it to be able to do it fairly, at Amberjack, we help advise our clients on where in the process it's likely to be effective and how you can do it in a fair way, ensuring that if you are applying it, that you're selecting candidates of equal merit to pass through to either next stage of your process or that final offer stage. So positive action is a very useful tool to use when it is used fairly and when it is appropriate to use. Okay. Just moving on now to assessing for potential. So when recruiting based on particularly past experience, you will inherently have groups of candidates who may not be able to reach the bar you're setting for them. At Amberjack, we have long been in the market for promoting assessing for potential. So when you're assessing for potential, measuring candidates against their ability to excel in these areas, regardless of their background, it can truly help you move towards being inclusive. At Amberjack, we have our own model of potential that you can see now on the screen. It's made up of 5 pillars. Grit, applied intellect, digital mindset, creative force and computational thinking. We work with our clients in advising on how this model could be implemented as part of their framework or as part of their process. And we have off-the-shelf products and we have bespoke products that we can offer that incorporate this model. And as I said, moving for assessing for potential removes all those barriers against assessing candidates on what past experience they may have had access to or may not have, which could be the case for some of those groups of candidates. And finally, just to finish, so the considerations for your next season before going into the new season, in terms of D&I, is making sure that the selection process that you have in place is currently unbiased. So that can be anything from who is making the selection decisions, have they received the adequate training, right through to what does your scoring criteria look like? Have you really challenged the criteria you're looking to assess candidates against? And as part of a service that Amberjack can absolutely offer is that review of your assessment materials, really looking at them from a D&I lens, making sure that the content or the scoring criteria used is inclusive. Also, another service Amberjack can offer is the communications review. So every time you are connecting with your candidates, whether that be through the information that's available to them on websites or the content that's sent directly to them, is that being inclusive? Is that connecting with all demographics? Do you need a more tailored approach for different groups of candidates? And then finally, if you have a requirement of groups of underrepresented demographics in your business, is there a way of using positive action in a lawful way to increase that representation fairly? And there's 4 considerations for going into next season, all of which Amberjack could provide support for if required. Okay, so that does bring us to the end of today's session. Thank you for watching. We hope it's been informative. Please do get in touch with us if you do have any questions. Thank you.